I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
And we're pretty sure...
You'll so want this.
Vince?
Yes.
What do you have in your possession today?
I have a slipcase. It's pretty neat. I know you're excited. Tales from the Crypt comic books.
Oh, good. It's not just a slipcase.
I just have a slipcase. I made it out of cardboard, and I know you want it.
Oh, you made that? That's amazing.
No, I didn't make this at
No,
all.
I know you did.
But you can buy these things. It's this EC library stuff. It's fantastic. They have pretty much everything that EC's published. And so here I have Tales from the Crypt, all 5 volumes, all the EC stuff. Because, and interestingly enough, just so anybody questions, yes, you do have all the Tales from the Crypt, even though it starts at number 17. So,
why did the numbering system?
Because instead of changing numberings and stuff, like they would necessarily publish something every month. Well, I mean they would, but they wouldn't necessarily publish Tales from the Crypt or the Crypt of Terror every month. So they started this as another series, so it had a different name. And in fact, it was a very different series. And when I say very different, I don't just mean in title. I mean they move from one thing to the next. So they'll publish like crime stories, and then they'll publish crime and war stories, and then they'll publish war stories, and they'll publish weird war stories, and then they'll publish weird stories, and then they'll publish weird terror stories.
That's why they have all those different titles, and people I think get a sense that there's these long runs of those.
So these things exist in mass, but these things don't necessarily have everything in the numbering system. So don't be freaked out. You do if you buy this, if you find this. I managed to find this because I walked into a comic and toy store in Humboldt, Kansas. A guy that I know. He's a terrific dude, Jim Cole. If you guys ever get a chance in Humboldt, Kansas, not that any of our viewers in Great Britain are going to be able to go to Humboldt, Kansas.
I got my entire tick collection from that guy.
Yes. He had some really interesting stuff. But I walked in there, and he sold this thing, this slipcase, these to me for $80 total. Ridiculous.
Oh, yes, that's good.
The very thing that he said to me was, it's really odd some of the stuff that will walk through this door. And these things, I looked them up. You can get this for around about $200.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
You flip one of these open, and I saw that it was in black and white. Was it originally published in black and white?
I believe it was originally published in color. Because,
Okay.
of course, we have covers in color.
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
I think...
Because covers are always in color.
I think these things were in color.
I think, generally.
Either way, there are some... There are reprints of these things by, I think, maybe the same company that did this. But if you get them in individual issues, you can get the reprints in color.
I do like that they're oversized. It's fun. It's fun to read a comic book with such large print.
Yeah.
Because you can see so much more of the detail. Like I've read comics before where I'm like, I wish I could get this larger.
You know, some of these things. What's interesting about the art in these, back in the day, we'll call it, back in the 50s. You look at some of this stuff. Just look at it. It's ridiculously detailed.
I was gonna make that same observation.
It
look
is.
Look at this haunted house.
It's amazing to me. And in some ways, it's almost photorealistic. It is very, very close to what you would expect. And of course, some things are just cartoonistic. I'm not sure if that's a word, but we're going to use it.
No, it is now.
I have coined a word.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about making up your own words. You can claim their words because you've said them.
And I will make the claim that if you like things like Twilight Zone, that you will probably get at least a kick out of these if you're open to more fantasy and horror than just sci-fi. Because they're very much so the same niche kind of story. It's a collection of short stories, obviously, if you know anything about Tales from the Crypt. And it's not as far away from what you would expect to see in the Tales from the Crypt TV shows. Only I would argue that they seem shorter because those are extended. So, I don't know. I do recommend these things because they're just so neat to have. And for the price that I got them, I just couldn't say no. Considering that I got less than 50%, or more than 50% off. I paid less than 50%.
Well, I'm sure they've been published in paperback.
Well, you can buy the individual these things. It's just the slipcase is really hard to find.
Right.
And no, they haven't published in paperback.
Oh, they
that I'm aware
haven't?
of.
Really? Okay.
I think they may have published
Sorry, I
some.
said that.
Now, I could be wrong. We're going to have a viewer that goes, no, Vince, they really do. And I'll be like, why are you talking that way? Oh, my God, it happened to me, too.
No. If so, I hope he does, because then he can tell us where we can get one, yeah.
But I don't think they're in paperback. I know that they've published them in hardback, and I know that they've published them in single issues. So go out there, find some old Tales from the Crypt, even if you don't find a massive slipcase of Tales from the Crypt. You know, hello in there! But even if you don't find this, you can still find Tales from the Crypt, and I do recommend looking back in there and seeing what really, really got people all hot and bothered and trying to kill comics back in the 50s. Because if you want to know what it is, it's this.
It's in there, yeah.
The Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, these things. Now, everything else they had problems with, too. But this is what really got their
rage, yeah.
And after reading them, you might understand about why just a tad bit.
Interesting.
I wouldn't necessarily want my kids reading some of the stuff that I've seen in these.
Well, Vince, today I'm going to talk about, and recommend, because this is something you actually can get pretty easily, Danny Fingeroth's Superman on the Couch, What Superheroes Really Tell Us About Ourselves and Our Society. This is a research project and book done by Danny Fingeroth, who is a writer in comics, who's been in comics for a lot of years, and he did a number of things, comics and TV. He oversaw Spider-Man comics in the 90s, I think late 80s and into the 90s. And I'm not sure exactly the years, but he was overseeing Amazing. And he also is the guy who adapted Spider-Man into the animated series. He was, I think, the showrunner, if not one of the main people who ran the show. And he's certainly written a lot of comics and things like that. And but here he feels a lot more like a historian and researcher. And he's done a whole lot. This came out in 2004, so this is a little bit outdated now. But a lot of what he has to say still certainly holds true now. Basically, the subtitle says it all. He's trying to get at the bottom of why superheroes are so prevalent in our society, why they've kind of stuck into in our minds, and why they've endured for so long. At the same time as comics have got less and less popular. He talks a lot about how Superman and Wonder Woman were selling, millions of copies in the 40s, and how they're selling only a few 100,000 copies more recently, and here, of course, in 2004, and that still holds true now, of course. He breaks it down and talks about different archetypes of superheroes and why, and like I said, tries to figure out, why people care about them, and his argument is that with heroes of any type, we gravitate to them because they tell us something about ourselves. And so he looks at the different archetypes of superheroes and says, what is it about Hulk that reflects humanity? What is it about Superman that reflects humanity? He has a whole chapter on Superman and the different superheroes that seem to be immigrants, which I thought was really interesting. He talks about Superman as an immigrant, and if you think about when Superman came out, how he was created by immigrants, by Jewish guys, and how immigration was a huge thing at that point, because then everybody came from somewhere else. You know what I mean? Everyone had at least it was generally only a couple of generations removed, if not in the generation that came over to America. You know what I mean? So most people would be very in touch with their own family lineages. And so Superman spoke to people in mass, because in some ways everybody was kind of from somewhere else. You know what I mean? And so it's really interesting. And then there were other superheroes that were that way as well. Wonder Woman, certainly.
That makes perfect sense why Superman hangs on so well. A lot of people say Superman's not cool, but he's highly relatable.
Yeah, well, in some ways he is, and in some ways he's not.
In concept, immigrant, truth, justice, the American way.
Concept, yeah.
They toss these things at people and they go, "Oh, I'm an American," or "Hey, I'm an immigrant." Mm-hmm. So people they latch on to something, and there's a reason why. He's the American symbol.
He's got a chapter on female superheroes that I think is probably one of, if not his best chapter, where he talks about how female superheroes have been written up until the late '90s, and then how things changed at that point. And what's really interesting is, and he made some points I hadn't considered before. He talks about, and this is something that everyone talks about how female protagonists and especially female superheroes are trying to look like they're really powerful and strong female characters, but very often they're still submissive to men. They're being written. It's being written by men. It's still a man's world. We're talking when Wonder Woman was invented in the '40s and things like that, where she's a strong female character, but only in as far as we understand the concept of a strong female character from the male perspective. So we're okay with there being female protagonists that are superheroes, but they don't get to do the same things men do. Wonder Woman had an immense amount of power, but she never got to use it, and we weren't doing anything with her. What's really interesting, and I somehow had never thought of this before, is that up until the late '90s with Buffy, and he really talks about Buffy a lot. When you get Buffy, that's when a female superhero, or when a female hero really is really allowed to be powerful and not be evil. And it's really interesting. He talks about how so many female powerful characters, supernaturally powerful characters, before this, were only allowed to have that kind of power if they did bad things.
I.e. Phoenix, right on.
I love that. It's really interesting. I never really thought about it. Where Jean Grey was still kind of that submissive to her man kind of character until she becomes the Phoenix. But guess what? The Phoenix goes dark and kills everyone. And this was really, he mentioned this too, and I thought it was interesting. You know who else does exactly the same dark evil Phoenix thing? Willow in Buffy, and in season 6, and he says that was a direct nod to Phoenix. Because Joss Whedon's a huge X-Men guy and has written a lot of X-Men. And they actually even mentioned Dark Phoenix during that arc. In the show, and that's kind of a throwback. But Buffy doesn't have this evil dark past. She has nothing she's atoning for. She gets to be both a superhero and a girl and a woman. When she's a girl, she becomes a woman. We get to see that happen, and so it's really interesting that he brings this up because he says, and this is another thing I never thought of. He says people always point to Xena as the first really big, powerful, strong female character in television, and the difference, though, the reason that he doesn't count her as really the first one that gets it right is she had this dark past she was atoning for. Her powerful abilities came from her time when she was an evil warlord running around the country murdering people, and she spends the entire series atoning for that. And he seems to argue that she's given that backstory because she's female. And anyway, it's really interesting. He's got a whole chapter on the differences in superhero teams and what those tell us about ourselves. He's got a whole chapter on the Hulk and Punisher and like anger. With characters, why we're interested in angry characters and that kind of thing. So anyway, I don't want to get too terribly far into it. I just finished reading this the other night. I actually kind of read the whole thing in one sitting, so it's very prominent on my mind right now.
I should read this book.
Yeah, you should definitely take a look at it.
In fact, we recommend that you read this book.
Yeah, I picked this up in my local library,
so want to.
So chances are it's easily findable. But anyway, that's what I recommend this week. And that's what Vince has that he's showing up. And thanks a lot for watching us recommend things and show stuff off. And we'll show you something next week that we're pretty sure that you're definitely going to want. And thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Vince.
See you next time.
These things are kind of heavy when they're all unwieldy like